So what is good, YouTube, and welcome back. In this episode we're talking about the Fujifilm 16mm f2.8 lens. So I rented in the 16-2.8 for about 2 months last year, and I didn't end up buying it. I'm going to talk about why later on in this review. But the main reason I use wide angle lenses is for cityscape shots, for architectural shots, both outdoors and indoors, and also for those lookup shots in the cities. Now for my type of photography, I find the 16mm focal range to be a bit too wide for street. That's because in order to get the shots I want, I'd have to get right up in people's faces with the 16 in order to take them, which is why I prefer using the 35 or the 50mm f2 lenses for street photography. So let's get straight into this review of the 16-2.8 and talk about the price, as that's probably one of the main selling points of this lens. So the 16-2.8 is one of Fujifilm's cheapest lenses, and it's their cheapest wide angle lens. So it comes in at just £340, which is less than double than the 16-1.4, which is £840. Meanwhile, there's the 14-2.8, which costs £750. And if you move into the zoom lenses, there's the 10-24 Mark II, which is £895. There's the larger and heavier 8-16mm, which is over £1,400. And also the 16-55 f2.8, which I brought recently, and that comes in at $940. So as you can clearly see, the Fujifilm 16-2.8 is an absolute bargain at £340. And to be honest, it's at that price point where even if you're not massively into wide angle photography, you can pick up this lens and keep it in your kit for those times where you need it, and it's much better than shelling out big money for either the 16-1.4 or one of the zoom lenses. So let's move on to the size, design and build of this lens. Now despite it being an f2.8, it's actually in the same family as Fujifilm's f2 lenses. So both in terms of its size, its style and its design, the Fujifilm 16mm f2.8 looks and feels exactly like the Fujifilm 23 f2, 35 f2 and 50 f2. It has the same aperture dial, it has the same focus ring, it's about the same size, it's light, and at just 155 grams, it's actually Fujifilm's third lightest lens. So it's the kind of lens where you can put it in your pocket, you can just stick it in your bag, and it doesn't weigh you down and you'll hardly notice it's even there. As with all of Fujifilm's other f2 lenses, the 16-2.8 is weather resistant. I've talked about this a million times on this channel, so I'm not going to go over it in detail, but I love shooting in the rain, in the snow, so having a lens which is weather resistant and also a camera body which is weather resistant makes a massive difference to my photography. So next up, let's talk about the autofocus performance on this 16-2.8. And as with all of Fujifilm's f2 lenses, the autofocusing speeds on this 2.8 are really fast and they're really accurate. So if you're using Fujifilm's newer camera bodies, so the X-T4, X-T3, Expo 3, any of them, you're going to have no problems whatsoever using continuous autofocus and tracking subjects moving across your frame. So I used it quite a bit for street photography when I've done the POV. I'll drop the link here so you guys can see what kind of shots you can get with the 16-2.8. I had absolutely no problems tracking subjects moving across my frame or moving towards my camera or away from it. And also in terms of autofocusing speeds when switching between a subject close to the lens or far away from the lens, as with all the f2 lenses, it was really fast. And as I said, with all the f2 lenses, including the 16 f2.8, I don't think you're going to have any problems regarding autofocus speed or autofocus performance. Also, if you're into video, the autofocusing on this lens is pretty much silent, so you're going to have absolutely no problems in that department either. So let's get on to the most important part of this review and talk image quality when it comes to the 16-2.8. Now, I don't really like pixel peeping, nor do I zoom in 800% to see how sharp a photo is or how sharp a certain area of a photo is. So all of my thoughts regarding image quality are simply based on my experience using the lens and my experience shooting on Fujifilm lenses for the past 3 to 4 years. So it's nothing scientific, it's just based on my experience here. when it comes to the 16 2.8, I was really impressed with the image quality actually, and it really does resemble the 23 f2, both in terms of the colors and the contrast. And it's no bad thing because all the Fujifilm's f2 lenses take great photos, and the Fujifilm 16 2.8 is no different in this department. So if I was to have one complaint about this lens, it'd be that when you shoot at f2.8 wide open, the corners of the image can be a bit soft. Now this normally isn't a problem, and to be honest, it's found in all the Fujifilm lenses, including all the f2 ones. But when you're doing street photography, this isn't much of a problem. Normally the subject is somewhere around the center of the frame. But when you're doing architectural photography or lookups or landscapes or cityscapes, you want the corners of the image to be really sharp. So I'd advise stopping down to f5.6 or above when you're taking lookups or architectural shots, because that way the corners of the image are also sharp. And the same goes for vignetting. So at f2.8 you get a slight vignette. So if you stop down to f4 and above, that goes away. So normally in my reviews, I talk about some of the things I dislike about the lenses I'm reviewing. But when it comes to the 16 2.8, if I was to be honest, there really isn't much to dislike, especially when you consider the price. The only thing I would say maybe is that it could be a bit faster, and you have the 16 1.4. So if you're shooting cityscapes at nighttime or landscapes at nighttime, that f1.4 aperture will come in handy. But that said, when you're normally doing architectural photography, more often than not you are stopping down in order to get the sharpest shot possible. And also you might be using a stabilized body or a tripod, so having the slower f-stop isn't really that much of an issue. Okay, so to wrap this review up, if you're in the market for a new wide-angle lens and you don't want to break the bank for the 16 1.4 or for one of Fujifilm's more expensive zoom lenses like the 8-16 or the 16-55, then this 16 2.8 probably is the right lens for you. So if you're into landscape photography, cityscapes, or if you're into doing lookups in the city, there really isn't a lot to dislike about this lens. Even if you're not into wide angle photography, you may just want a wide angle lens to sit in your kit just for those days where you need it. It's small enough and light enough to keep in your bag without noticing. So yeah, all in all, I highly recommend it. Also, I feel this lens will be absolutely perfect for travel photography or for documentary photography or videography. And to be honest, there really isn't much to dislike about the 16 2.8. At its price point, I think it's a fantastic lens and it's fantastic value. So the reason I didn't buy the 16 2.8 is because I have a couple of lenses already which cover that focal range. So I have the 10-24, the old version, and I also have the 16-55. So both of those zoom lenses, they cover the 16mm focal range, so there's no real point for me to get the 16 2.8. That said, I really enjoyed using it and I do highly recommend it. So if you have any questions at all about the 16 2.8 or you've used it before and have your own thoughts on it, drop them in the comments below and I'll make sure to get back to you. And also, as always, you guys can do me a massive favor by hitting that thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button too. A massive thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.